Hi, my name is Joanna Jennings and I am evaluating this handout for accessibility. This is a handout that I use with my Spanish 2 students to help them to understand how the past works in Spanish. This handout is accessible because it does have colors, contrasting colors. I used bold titles and I used some images to provide interest and to aid in comprehension. I also, for language comprehension, I put the Spanish and the English with some examples. I also use examples of correctly conjugated verbs. I also use bold lettering and examples of different verbs, but it is not accessible because I did not provide alt text for my images, and I do feel that these images would really help the reader to understand the content better. Also, it is not accessible because some of the font is too small and it's not easy to see, and they cannot adapt it and make it bigger unless they zoom in. Also, another way to make this handout more accessible would be to break it up into smaller sections, make it bigger, and do lists or put these verbs and the endings in charts or tables so that it is easier to understand for people who have a disability with processing. I also could make it more accessible by recording audio so that when they click on each of the images or each of the boxes, that it could play and say what is in each thing. And that would make it really accessible for people who cannot see, people with visual impairments. Yep, that's about it for this one. My second thing that I'm evaluating for accessibility is this slideshow that I use with Spanish 5 in our art unit. And this is accessible because it has text, it has contrast between the font and then the background image. Also, I use color, and it helps because I use images and text to help kids really process the information and to process it in different ways. I use these graphs or these charts to help them to do that. The slides, when I actually play them, which I will do at the end a little bit, the different things come in at different times by helping the kids who really, or the people who have processing disabilities, to be able to process a smaller amount of information at a time. And it's also more visually appealing, and it helps with memory. I also have very colorful, contrasting, beautiful pictures, which makes it accessible. And what doesn't make it accessible is that I don't have any alt text on the images, which for a visually impaired person would make this slideshow kind of useless, really. The only thing they would get are the name of the artist, the art movement, and the century, which is good information, but they really would miss out on anything about the examples of paintings and things like that. Also, I could make this more accessible by recording audio on each slide and really saying what's important about it, and making it accessible for visually impaired people. I could also make it accessible by creating each slide in a little bit more of a friendly way with like lists and bullets and things like that, so that the text within each slide could be more appealing. I will now play a little bit of the slideshow so you can see how some of it works. I don't know if you could really see that. I don't think you could, so I will skip that part. But I really I'm a lot more aware now of how I can make things accessible for people with disabilities, and just to make it even just more interesting and easier to process for all students involved. So this was really a helpful assignment.